So today's topic is data types, right? Right. Let me know once screen is visible. Hello, am I audible?
Yeah,
Voice is breaking.
yes, you are.
Okay. So any confusions, any doubt in yesterday's class? Anyone? Any issues with variables? What are variables? Okay, no worries. So let's start with data types, right? So yesterday we have seen few of the things like we have seen that there are different kinds of variables like integer, float, string, char, boolean, right? So all these things are called as data types in Java, right? Now there are two different kinds of data types in Java: primitive and non-primitive data types. So let me just create a new class today. Right. So right. So data type is nothing but the specifier that is used with the a specifier that is used with a variable to predetermine what kind of data it can hold, right? So for example, if we want to create a variable of text data, then we will define a specifier string, and that is called as data type, right? So there are two different kind of data type: primitive data types and non-primitive data types, right? So primitive data types are the data types like we have studied, like integer, we have studied float, we have studied char, we have studied Boolean, right? So all these are primitive data types, right? Non-primitive data types, we have covered string, and we will cover arrays. We will cover Boolean. We will cover character, right? So all these are non-primitive data types. So primitive and non-primitive. So non-primitive, except for string, we will cover in later chapters. Right? And as far as primitive data type goes, so primitive data types are not classes in Java, right? So as I told you in the very first class, that in Java everything is all about classes and objects, right? But primitive data types are those data types which are not classes. So there is no class called as int, float, and char, boolean. While if we talk about non-primitive data types in one line, so these are classes. For example, if I open this string data type, right? So if I go to this string, you can see that this is a class declared by Java, right? So non-primitive data types are those data types which are classes in Java, and primitive data types are those data types which are not classes in Java, right? Make sense, everyone? So primitive data types, as I told you, primitive data types are those data types which are not classes, right? And non-primitive data types are those data types which are classes in Java, right? I hope everyone is following till here, right? So as I told you, if I look into the string, it's a class, it's a predefined class in Java libraries, right? So these classes, if we are saying that this is a class, there are methods, right? You can see these are all the methods they have defined, right? So they have a lot of things when it comes to classes. But in non-primitive type data types, they don't have further methods because these are not classes. So you can just say integer, int number, int a, int b, int c. You cannot have any methods in those, right? So that is one thing. Now, why primitive data types are used? What's the so primitive data types basically specifies two things. One is your type, another one is your size of variable values. So if I talk about any primitive data type, be it int, be it float, be it char, be it boolean, it specifies two things only, right? So what are those things? One is type of variable value, right? Means the value my variable is holding is of text, a number, a decimal number, or a boolean field like true or false, or the size of the field, size of the variable value it can hold. Does it make sense, guys? Using any data type is very easy. We have seen yesterday. So I'll create a public right string args. Now using any data type is easy. We have seen yesterday only. So for example, we want to create any variable with numeric value. We will say integer a is equals to 200, right? So what it is saying, it is saying there is a variable a which is holding a value 200, and this 200 is of int data type, right? Make sense?
Yes.
Okay. Now, if I talk about numeric fields, right? So we have discussed only one kind of data type, int, but you can also use the size. For example, if you want to store a pretty big number, then you cannot use int directly. There are different data types for it. For example, if you want to hold a medium range of number, right, then you can have a different data type, right? So a numeric data types are categorized into four things. One is your byte, right? Another one is your short. Third one is your int, and the fourth one is your long, right? So if I talk about numeric numbers without decimal, right? So these four are the primitive data types that are available in Java, right? So all the four data types are used to store the numeric data, means everything can store only the numbers, right? What's the difference between these four? These four are different on the basis of their size, right? So whenever we are using any byte number, right? So it takes 1 byte of your memory, right? So in JVM, we have a memory defined, right? So whenever we have installed Java, right? If you have noticed while installing Java, right, there must be a screen where you could actually allocate the memory of your system, right? In your JVM, right? So for example, this is an operating system, right? Operating system has a predefined memory, right? It is like 250 GB, 500 GB. It could be anything based on your hardware configuration, right? Now this memory would be further divided into multiple tasks that this operating system is handling. For example, this IntelliJ is open, it is taking one significant amount of memory. For example, if you talk about this Zoom application, this is taking one significant amount of memory. So every application, everything in the operating system requires the memory, right? So you must have noticed in your operating system while running multiple applications, you come out of the error that memory out of exception, right? And you need to close some certain applications. Is that right? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Have you noticed this error, everyone? Yes, no, please.
Is it same for all of us?
Yes. Have you noticed that when you open a lot of many applications in your operating system, your system hangs and you need to close few applications in order to work further?
Yes, sir, sometimes.
Sometimes it is because your operating system has a limited memory, right? So while you execute your program, while you create your program, it is very important for us to specify or to use memory wisely. Otherwise your memory will be exhausted and you have to close the applications, or you have to allocate more memory to your JVM, right? Now that's the reason in Java they have introduced 4 different categories for the same type of data: byte, short, int, and long. And the only difference between is the memory that is allocated to these data type. For example, for byte it is 1 byte of memory. For short this is 2 byte of memory. And for this you can say 4 bytes of memory, and for long it is 8 bytes of memory, right? Any questions, any doubt, anyone?
No, sir.
Okay, so just give me a moment. Right now, if I talk about in exact numbers, what really happens when it comes to 1 byte, right? So basically what happens in JVM, whenever you're defining, let's say, integer a, it has seen you have defined integer a, right? So what it will do, it will go to your JVM, it will allocate 4 bytes of memory. Okay, so 4 bytes of memory is allocated. Not doesn't matter how small or how big number you are using, right? But that's not the right way to do it. You should always try to think how large your number is, and according to that always try to create a data type, right? So if I talk about y by 1 byte, it can store numbers ranging from -127 to 128, right? So if you are storing a number which is greater than 128, you have to ultimately go to short, int, or long. So byte has a restriction that you can store numbers from -127 to 128. The reason is that to represent a number 129, it takes 1 byte of memory. From -127 to 128, minimum memory to require is 1 byte. Does it make sense, guys?
Yeah,
Yes,
it does.
yes.
Great.
Okay.
Yeah, Shalin, got you.
Yeah. Just a second. Let me just reconfirm. Now, to represent a number ranging from -32,768 to 32,767, right? You can use short data type, right? So minimum memory to represent a number for 32,767, you require 2 bytes. So if you are dealing with the numbers which are ranging from this particular thing to this particular thing, you can always use short data type, right? Make sense, guys?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Now int. See, I have used int in data type to store a number 200, but you can store actually the numbers ranging from, it's a pretty big number, so I'll just write it down. It's a pretty big number. So from this particular number to, you can actually represent right? So for these big numbers, you can actually use integers or int data type, right? So basically, if you notice, I'm using 200 to 200 value to store in a variable a of data type int, right? So what it has done, it has allocated 4 bytes of memory in my JVM, but I'm just representing a number which could be represented by short, that is 2 bytes, 200, right? So I have literally wasted 2 bytes of memory. In order to organize, in order to better manage your memories, we have these different ranges for numeric numbers, right? Make sense, guys?
Yeah,
Yes,
so
I
it
mean,
end contains like around 10 digits.
Yes, yes. And
So
long is 8 bytes. It's pretty big, very big. I'll simply write it down. I just cannot count it. So -9. Right? So from this to this is the range of your long data type. Right? So syntax remains same. If you want to say short, for example, if you want to create a byte, so byte a is equal to, let's say, 125. Integer b could be 200. Short, if you want to give, you can say 200, and long you can say, so you can use anything, right? Syntax is pretty much same for all the data types.
so one thing, Charlene, yesterday we have seen L or F with these.
We are talking about numeric number without decimal.
With long, can we use L?
We can use.
Okay.
We will discuss about this, why this F, D, L in the later chapters.
Okay. Great.
Once we understand more about Java. Pretty complex topics those are.
Great.
Right? Any questions, any doubt till now, anyone in these 4 data types?
So
Yeah.
like if we need to use byte, but if we use short, so we will lose or we will waste that much block of memory.
Yes. So let's see. For example, let's try one thing. I have this A, right? Byte A can store only the data from 127 to 128. I'm storing 125. That is fine, right? Right. And if I run this program, it is printing 125. Now let's say if I'm storing 200. As soon as I gave 200, it started giving me error that your required type is byte, but you are giving int. Int is not required. You can also give short. Right?
Yes.
Obviously, if you give it int or if you give it long is 8 bytes. You are storing a data which could be saved using 2 bytes. So you are wasting 6 bytes of memory in your JVM. So while your class is executed, this is pretty complex and I wanted to discuss in later class, but just to give you an overview, when you are executing any class, what happens is it calculates your memory, how much memory is required to execute each and every program. And how your memory is calculated? By your variables data type, right? The number of variables you are using. For example, over here in my main Java, right? So I'm using multiple data types, right? So your string takes data types based on your text, right? So it could be let's say 4 bytes, 4 bytes. So 8 bytes of this, 1 byte of character, 9 bytes, 1 byte of Boolean, 10 bytes, 4 bytes of float, that is your 14 bytes. So this particular program takes 14 bytes of memory, right? So every time before your program executes in JVM, your memory is calculated, and that much memory is allocated to this program. And if your memory is not present, let's say I have pretty exhausted memory, right? So it will give me an error that memory out of exception. I'm not, it's like an application running. Let's say this is your JVM or your memory, which is present in your JVM, right? So this is your memory, right? As soon as I have created integer a is equals to 10, right? So what really happened? A 4 byte of memory is a variable is created over here, right? With a block of memory. So this particular memory is assigned to this variable a, right? And the size of this memory is your 4 bytes, right? Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, clear. Pretty.
So this is happened when you declare this variable, means when you write this thing integer a, right? Just this part, forget about equals to 10. So with integer a, what really happened? Your memory of 4 byte is allocated to a variable called as a in your JVM. Makes sense, right? Any questions, any doubt?
Clear, very
No, sir.
clear.
Now,
No, sir.
when you say equals to 10, what really happens? Your 10 is picked up and put up in this memory, right? Let's say you have few more, right? You have one short variable, okay, 20, and you have one byte variable, and you have one long variable, right? So what really happens? As soon as you said this particular thing, short b, right? What really happened? A block of memory is created, right? Which is pointing towards b. So b variable is pointing to this short memory, and 2 bytes is allocated to this memory block, right? Make sense? And 20 is given. So if you notice, your memory is allocated in JVM while you are declaring your variables. As I told you yesterday, there are two parts. One is your declaration part, and then is your initialization part, right? So in declaration, what really happens? Your memory is created inside your JVM. While initializing, your value comes up and put up in that memory block. Right now, as we have seen yesterday, we change the value of a to 20, right? But we are not declaring it again. We are just changing the value of a, right? So what will happen in your JVM? It will just erase this and it will change to 20 in the same memory block.
Shalin, sir, a question. But in Counselor, it showed it's the boat's value for a. Am I right or wrong?
Come again. So now 10 is lost, right? So we have seen yesterday, right? Once we change the value of a and we did the system.out.println, we are printing 20. 10 is lost. 10 is not anywhere saved now.
So if
Right?
if we
For example, you
okay.
have a room in your house which can accommodate one member, or let's say you go to some hotel which is a single bedroom, right? Now, if I go to that hotel, I'll be staying in that bed, right? In that room. Now, if you go to that hotel, obviously I have to leave you to occupy that bed, right? So for the same bed, the older person has to leave, then only the newer person can occupy the same bed. Similarly, a memory is allocated to a variable A whose initial value was 10. So 10 was there in the memory block. But as soon as we change the value of A to 20, what really happened? Memory block 20 is placed and 10 is lost. 10 has to leave. Make sense?
Yes, sir.
Any questions? Any doubt?
Shalin sir, again a question. If we print both value of A, so how about this? It can take 4 byte or no?
Come again?
If we print both value of A, like integer A equal to 10 and A equal to 20. So if we print both of them, so on that time.
So for example, I'll just stop sharing this and share my screen. Okay. So my integer is 200, right? I printed 200. So what will be the output?
200.
This line has nothing to do with memory allocation. This line is doing what? It is just printing the value of A, which is there in the memory, right? Now we change the value of A to 400, right? And we did this thing again. Then a 400 would be printed. So 200 is lost, right? Now your final value of A is just 400, right? 200, you cannot use 200 as of now. After this line 6, the value of A got changed, right? Make sense? So if you want to use both the values, you have to declare a new variable. Does it make sense, guys?
Yes, sir. Yeah.
Yeah, pretty clear, very clear. Thank you.
So JVM is very complex, right? It just one thing JVM does. We will see how JVM really works as soon as we progress throughout your core Java.
Excuse me, sir. I have a question.
Yeah.
So when you say memory, do you mean the temporary memory of computer RAM?
Yes. And IntelliJ is a very intelligent. This tool is very intelligent, right? So if you, as soon as you will make a mistake, it will start pointing red, right? So you will come to know, okay, you have made some mistake. So for example, in byte, if I change a number to a pretty big number, right, it will automatically start giving me red line. So I'll come to know, okay, there is some mistake in this, right? And if I go to hover on this and see the description, I'll get an idea about what is really happening. Okay. Guys, when I learned Java, right, so I used to do this in Notepad. So there was my professor in college who used to say, always write your program in Notepad, because Notepad is not that intelligent. I'll never get to know from Notepad that I'm making this mistake. And I had to identify it on my own. Okay. Now so we had discussed a numeric data type without decimals. We had seen a character and a Boolean yesterday. Boolean is used to store the true or false, and char is used to store the alphabets, a single alphabet of the English language. It could be a capital alphabet, it could be a small alphabet, and the amount of memory required is 1 byte for this, right? And the amount for memory required is 1 byte for Boolean, right? So char and Booleans are done. Now let's talk about numeric data type with the decimal. Right? So there are two. One is your float, which we have seen yesterday. Another one is double, right? Both are used to store the same type of data. So what is the difference? The difference is only in the size, the amount of data it can hold, right? So float basically takes your 4 bytes and your double takes your 8 bytes, right? So if I talk about float, it can store up to 6 to 7 values after decimal. So for example, let's say I have a float C. Float A is equal to 10. Dot 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, right? So it is saying five, 6, 7. So basically, if I'll talk about in bits, so 4 bytes is nothing but 32 bits and 8 bytes is your 64 bits. So if I talk about 32-bit floating point, range is unlimited. It is just recommended to use float if you need to save memories, right? So there is no restriction on the range of what range of data you can use. It is just that how much of memory you are allocating in your JVM, as we discussed of for integer, right? So if you're using a float variable, it will be allocated your 32 bits of memory. But if you're using a double variable, it will use your 64 bits or 8 bytes of memory. Double C, right? So there is no as such restrictions on the range, right? Now why this F is used? So if I remove this F, I have to make this variable as double, right? So by default, your Java understands your decimal number. It takes your decimal numbers as your 64 bits number or your 8 byte number, right? But as soon as if you give F, you are restricting Java to allocate a shorter memory than your double variable requires. So this is how your Java identifies that, okay, this is a float number. If F is appended, if F is not appended, Java understands that this is a double number. Does it make sense, guys?
Yeah, so
Yes,
the
sir.
only point is that it's not restricted like a byte short and
Yes.
okay, great. So which one is mostly used?
Double is
project?
mostly used.
Yeah.
So in industry, double is mostly used. And if I talk about numeric, int and longs are used.
Okay, sir, actually, I don't know the difference between these two. So I mean the usage when you have to use the first one, or when we have
As
to
I
use
told
it.
you, right? There is no restrictions on the size of a number. It's just how much memory is allocated. Let's go back to that whiteboard. Can I have that
Okay.
whiteboard again? Okay. So for example, what we are doing, can you see the whiteboard, everyone?
Yes. Yes, sir.
So let's say I have a number float. A is equals to 10, right? 10.1. And then I have a number double B, let's say 20, 10.1. All right. So discard this thing. What is happening? Okay, so this is, ignore this thing. Now what will happen if I talk about only these two number, right? Your, as soon as you say float A, right, a block of memory would be created, right? And since it is a float, you will say 4 bytes of memory would be allocated, right? Make sense? And when you install, you assigned value 10.1, 10.1 would come to this particular block of memory. All right. Obviously, in any memory, right, it's your binary representation, right? That's why we are talking about in bits and bytes. Now your B, right? As soon as you are declaring a B, what will happen? A block of memory would be allocated. A block of memory would be created and it will be assigned your 8 bytes. And you are again storing a number 10.1. Right? So the difference is for float and double, you are giving 4 bytes extra to a double variable. Right? You might be storing the same value, but for memory allocation, it is different. 4 bytes and 8 bytes. So as per user, I'm not getting affected, but for the end user, it is affecting it. For the memory, it is affecting it. Any questions? Any doubts? Anyone?
Okay, sir. So what's the role of F here? So just we write F to reserve just 4 bytes, to save 4 bytes?
Yeah, it's like a syntax in Java. As of now, you can just go with syntax. We will talk about more about F and all other things when we'll talk about primitive data types. But for now, you can, in simple words, you can say it is for Java to understand that this is a float variable.
Okay. So basically it's save 4 bytes. If
Yes.
we take a double, it reserve 8 bytes.
Yes.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Just a question, quick question, Shalin here.
Mm-hmm.
So these things that's showing here on the white screen,
Mm-hmm.
is this for usage that's for the storage purpose? Is this for the which memory we are talking? Hard drive, RAM, temporary? Which memory is allocating these things
So
on a
Java,
processor or in a computer?
okay, yeah. When I talk about JVM, right, it's pretty complex in memory terms. There are different kinds of memory. There is a heap memory. There is a string pool. Some part of your memory comes from your RAM. Some parts of your memory is allocated from your hard drive, right? So it's pretty complex how it is actually working inside your JVM.
So that means it depends on both of them, hard drive and RAM. Is that correct?
Correct. You can say that.
Okay, thank you.
We can talk about JVM and how internally it works, might be at the end of this training. but not before that. Let's understand all the concepts and then we can always talk about JVM.
Yeah, very good. Great, Charlene. Quite interesting to see this stuff.
Right. Now, other two data types, as I told you, char and Boolean, right? So there are 4 plus 2 plus 2, 8 primitive data types in Java. Can you name all? Int, short, byte, long, double, float, char, Boolean. Right. So we will talk about non-primitive data types as we will go ahead with this training as and when required in different chapters.
Friends, if you can do a little bit of research on the key, what was that? I forgot it. I don't know what's happening to me. Keywords. Yeah, keywords in Java. You will find images, you will find very short videos on it. Take a look into it. We will definitely be using this stuff and we might need it in the future to know it. So take it as one of the stuff that you will take a look into it in your free time. Great, Charlene. If it's getting late for you, you can.
Yeah, I have to really leave.
Yeah,
okay, thank you so much, Kalash.
Yeah,
thank you.
I will stay with the class and see if there is anything we can do here and there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charlene. Thank you very much.